Now, today's final session will be a Q&A with Simone Reitzes, Vice President of Global Pension and Benefits at Scotiabank. Welcome to the virtual stage, Simone.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon.
Of course. I wanted to just start off by having you introduce yourself and telling us a little bit about your role there at Scotiabank.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So really proud to be here on behalf of Scotiabank, a leading bank in the Americas. We have almost 100,000 employees in more than 30 countries and over $1 trillion in assets. So a really significant organization. My role in particular, I'm the Vice President of Global Pension and Benefits. So that includes oversight of policy, strategy, and financial reporting for both our defined benefit and defined contribution pension plans, our employee share ownership plans, as well on the benefit side, all of our total well-being strategies, including physical, financial, social, and mental health, and our leave policies. So that's the portfolio that I look after for the bank.
Great. So earlier this morning, we heard in an earlier session about managing benefits plans and employees globally. Since Scotiabank is obviously a global bank, and the word global is right there in your job title, can you talk a little bit about how you make sure that those benefits plans are aligned across different countries and how that works for Scotiabank?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And for us, it's really more around aligning philosophy or guiding principles than it is around aligning specific tactics of the benefits plan. No surprise, and Nancy will be well versed in this as well. Obviously, every country, every region has its own set of legislation, its own set of social norms, its own set of priorities, different healthcare infrastructure. So to take one benefit plan and also different maturity in terms of the technology space. So to take one benefits plan and try to fit it into all of our countries is like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. So really our approach is around guiding principles, and then looking at that set of guiding principles around total well-being and working with our business partners in all of the countries that we operate to best fit those guiding principles into the local infrastructure.
Okay. Great. So when it comes to the benefits plan in general, what would you say is influencing you and your team's perspective? Again, in an earlier session, we heard about data. So what kind of data are you looking at to make sure you better understand the use in your plan and the spend? And when you're considering making changes, how are you implementing them and introducing them to employees?
Sure. So a couple of questions there. I'll try to go in order. In terms of what influences our thinking and our strategy for our benefits plan, there's really so many different factors that come into play. So absolutely, we work very closely with all of our vendors to collect current data. I smiled when I heard Sean mention monthly data. We've had that struggle as well. We'll give a report to our senior leadership team with month-end data, and they'll say, "Well, it's the 10th of the month. Where's the newer data?" Or we'll go to our employees and say, "Great news! We have a daily feed in our group RSP balances," and they'll say, "Well, daily, I want to see the transaction I did an hour ago." So for sure, there's always pressure in the technology space to get more data faster. For us, receiving all of that data, looking at trends, looking at both our own experience as well as a book of business for our vendors can help us see where we might be an outlier or where there's an opportunity to implement a different strategy is extremely valuable, especially around mental health. We've been very open in sharing over the past number of years our investment in preventative mental health. And data is really key there to knowing the right investments to make, both in terms of ensuring the health of our workforce and the health of our organization, that we're doing what makes sense for us as an employer, but also as a business. And aside from data, I would say the other big influencer for us on our benefit strategy is really employee feedback. We survey our employees a number of times each year, and many of our best ideas come from an employee comment in a survey or employees reaching out to our call center. Obviously, we test all of our ideas with focus groups, and we hear back from employees who are really living the experience, especially this year with COVID. Employee feedback has been more timely than ever to help us shape and make sure we're doing the right thing for our employees next.
Okay, great. And just, I know I asked a lot of questions in one go there, but just my last point, just about when you're considering making changes, how do you implement those changes, and what's the process for telling employees about them?
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that last point. So yeah, usually I would say COVID aside, it is quite a lengthy process for us to implement changes from a technology perspective. But this year we worked, I think, just like everyone else, faster than ever to get solutions out as quickly as possible. Obviously, internally, there's quite a significant socialization process as we're making those approval decisions. So wanting to make sure our leadership team is aligned, our various businesses are aligned, very different segments of our workforce, right? So obviously we have 1,000 retail branches in Canada. So wanting to make sure that our whatever platform of benefits we roll out works well for our Canadian banking employees, for our corporate employees. Whenever we have another 12,000 corporate employees in the GTA area who may have very different needs. And one thing that we did a little bit differently this year, and this was pre-COVID, so interesting, our benefits year actually runs April 1st to March 31st of each year. So we did our big splashy benefits rollout January, February, business as usual. And before we even got to April 1st to kick off the benefits, our whole world had changed. So in terms of communications, this year what we did a little bit differently, we moved to much more interactive communications. In the past, I think many large employers will smile when I mention the 100-page PDF plan booklets and the way that we expected employees to engage. And now it's really around short videos. We're using internal social media to roll out videos of 30 or 40 seconds to help employees learn about our benefits, really simple text, graphics-based style in terms of communicating. So trying to kind of get to a consumer-grade experience for employees in our benefits communications has been a big investment for us this year and turned out really well.
Okay, great. Interesting to see sort of that different dynamic as well with the before and after coronavirus. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of questions. I wanted to sort of move in that direction and just ask you a little bit more about the conversations that you're having with your consultants or your advisors. Are they different than the ones you were having 5 years ago? Maybe we could kind of put that into context pre-COVID, and then also, in particular, how are they changing in light of the last few months?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and definitely different than 5 years ago, different than 5 months ago. Yeah. And I would say the biggest difference for us is around employee experience. So I would say 5 years ago, and employee well-being has always been at the center of what we're trying to support. That part hasn't changed. But the approach to engaging employees, as we see many diverse generations in our workforce, I think 5 years ago, we were very focused on the right levels, the right plan design. So the right leave policies, the right levels of co-insurance, the right pension plan design, the right contribution levels, matching formulas, really wanting to make sure that our plan design itself was modern, appropriate, supportive of all of the diverse employees, I'd say was the biggest part of the conversation. Today, what we talk about is employee engagement. So having the right plan design is absolutely important. It's at the core of what we do and how we deliver to our employees. But you can have the absolute best plan, and if employees don't know about it, don't engage in it, it's actually not achieving anything that we want it to achieve in terms of supporting and engaging our workforce to live a healthy style and bring their best selves to work. So today I would say we spend a lot more time talking about consumer grade technology. That's a term that I learned in the last 12 or 24 months. I would not have been able to speak to that a couple of years ago. And that's really around having, the Apple or the Amazon experience that when employees sign up for, when you buy something on Amazon, you see in the cart, others like you also chose, and you think, oh, great idea. And so wouldn't it it be cool if we could do that in our benefits plan? As you go add a dependent, it says, well, have you thought about life insurance? Or others like you also chose dental coverage. So that's where we spend a lot of our time these days, is on technology and employee experience, and wanting to really help employees make benefits easier.
Okay, great. And then specifically around coronavirus, what changes has Scotiabank made or considered making in light of the current environment? I think we talked a little bit offline when we were planning this discussion around some new initiatives for 2020. So if you could talk a little bit to that. Obviously, some of them were already underway when everything happened. So we could just talk a little bit about how that changed and why they were introduced now, and how that all went down with employees.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, the timing couldn't have been, I guess, better or worse, depending on your perspective. But our plan year kicked off April 1st, just as we were going into global lockdown from a COVID-19 perspective. So maybe I'll start by spending just 2 minutes on what we had planned for the year, and then what actually happened. I think nobody's living exactly the year that they had planned in 2020. So we had announced back in October of 2019 that we were expanding our personal days. So the bank had already provided in Canada 3 personal days to all employees, and that's to take care of any, really linked to our mental health strategy, any personal needs, appointments, childcare, elder care, personal mental health, self-care. So coincident with World Mental Health Day last October, we announced that we were expanding from 3 to 5 personal days for all employees in Canada, fully paid, no questions asked. And so that was obviously extremely well received by our workforce. And what actually happened, by the time we got to April 1st, we had expanded that offering from 5 personal days to 10 personal days for 2020 only. So our ongoing offering remains 5 days per year instead of the 3 that were in 2019. But in 2020, we gave everyone 10 personal days, and that was in recognition of all kinds of personal obligations that employees had out of COVID, whether it was, we heard from people they spent their personal days dealing with the early days of school closures as they were getting into place a more sustainable plan. People spent time lining up for grocery stores, again, something we had never anticipated we would need to do. So that was the one kind of big change. So directionally, we were already looking at more personal time. COVID just really amplified the need to support employees on a short-term basis. The other thing that we rolled out earlier in the year was expanded parental leave. So that was a really exciting one for us, not related to COVID, but expanding our paid parental leave program for all parents. So that includes mothers, fathers, same-sex parents, adoptive parents, whereas previously our program was really geared at supporting birth mothers. We really wanted to have a more inclusive policy that supports financial well-being, mental health of the entire family, but also supports our gender equality advancement agenda by letting all employees spend time with their families and really removing the stigma around only women taking time out of the workforce as primary caregivers. The other new addition for us this year, I spoke a little bit already about technology and how important it is. So we incorporated, it was supposed to be April 1st, and with COVID, we actually jumped right in mid-March, virtual healthcare for all employees in Canada. So starting, I think it ended up being around March 20th, all employees had access to bank-paid virtual health care through a partner, which again was really, really timely with COVID as doctors' offices were not accessible. People were scared to leave the house. Nobody wanted to be in crowded emergency rooms. I mean, you don't want to be there in the best of times, but especially during a global pandemic, helping employees and their families get access to the care they needed was hugely important. And obviously well received by our employees. And maybe I'll just touch on one more COVID-related offering that we rolled out. So again, with April 1st being the beginning of our plan year, the way our plan works, it's a flex plan. All employees get a certain level of core coverage, and then flex credits that they can allocate to various places. And so one of those places is a well-being account. So this year, in light of COVID, we gave all employees an additional $500 in their well-being account to support them with any well-being needs that they had, whether it was purchasing gym equipment for their home when their gym was closed. We also expanded the definition of our well-being account to allow employees to be reimbursed for home office equipment, so chairs, desks, monitors, printers. Obviously, very timely for our corporate workforce who very quickly transitioned to a work-from-home environment, and also food delivery services. So I mentioned the anxiety that was created by lining up for grocery stores. I live in a big household. I personally experienced that. It was the worst part of my week. So allowing employees to sign up for grocery delivery services and having those fees covered through the well-being account was one other kind of quick pivot that we made. And when you ask where our ideas come from, that actually came from someone on my team, a younger employee who was saying, too nervous to go to the grocery store, didn't know what to do, was ordering kind of Uber Eats every night. And he was like, well, if you ask me what I want, that's where I'm incurring the most additional expenses. So really listening to our employees is what helped us come up with some of those ideas and roll them out very quickly.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's one I hadn't really thought of. It's a great idea. I wanted to also just reference that in the 2019 Workplace Benefits Awards, so last year's Benefits Awards, Scotiabank was recognized in the absence management category as well as the diversity category. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how those elements play a part in your total rewards package and how it reflects the organization as a whole.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with absence management, and again relates back to total well-being for us. And absence management is really around preventative mental health support. Again, in the last couple of years, I think every year in the last 3, we've enhanced our mental health benefits in one way or another. This year, we've added the ability to pay for extended family members' mental health support through our well-being account. So again, we were thrilled and humbled to be recognized in the absence management category. But it didn't mean that our work was done. It just pushed us to be even better and do more and think about what support our employees need. And again, this was an employee who came to us with an adult child who really needed support. Once you hit 18 or 25 and you're in school, you're kind of bumped out of the benefits plan. But this employee's story was valid, that her child was bumped out of the benefits plan, but not bumped out of her life or her mental health stresses. So finding ways to accommodate extended families, such as senior parents, adult children, is something new this year that's also being funded through our well-being account. So a little bit about how our mental health and absence management strategy fits into our total well-being program. There is no health without mental health. And in terms of diversity and inclusion, again, something that's always been extremely important to the bank and amplified this year more than ever. We have, the support of our CEO in terms of, we were one of the first organizations to sign on to the UN Diversity and Inclusion Principles last year, and just recognizing that diverse organizations outperform. So it's not only the right thing to do for the communities that we live and work in, but the right thing to do for the bank and our shareholders.
Okay, great. I wanted to speak a little bit more about diversity and inclusion. Can you talk a little bit about how you demonstrate to employees that it's important for Scotiabank to be active and engaged in the issues that concerns them?
Absolutely. And I have some notes here. It's such an important topic. I don't want to miss anything. But there's been in the last couple of weeks or months, a few new and a few amplified initiatives from an employee perspective. And then if it's okay, I'll talk a little bit about how Scotiabank's also supporting the broader community and our customers through our CEO's involvement in initiatives such as Black North. So in terms of our employees specifically, we actually had rolled out earlier this year an employee diversity survey, which we relaunched in the last few weeks to better understand our employee population, any diversity representation gaps, and extend reporting beyond just visible minority to include race and ethnicity, which is obviously extremely important in making sure that we have the right representation of our employees. The other thing that was a little bit unique, the other initiative, was providing our senior leaders with the opportunity to hear directly from employees who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color across Canada, the UK, and the US through listening sessions. So we set up listening sessions and we asked for volunteers, and we were very fortunate that our employees were very happy to share, where our senior executive population heard directly from employees identifying as Black, Indigenous, or people of color about their experience living, working, banking with Scotiabank. And they were open sessions where we had hundreds of other employees dial in to listen. So that was a fascinating experience. I think it's very easy to hear on the news about racism and say, oh, that's something that happens somewhere else. But for everyone to take a stand and say, we need to understand what's happening in our homes, in our backyard, in our organization. So those were powerful sessions, and I'm sure those stories have impact and will result in further action from our leaders. The other step that we've taken is in supporting both people managers and employees to recognize and control and confront racism, including anti-Black racism. So we launched a series of new leader guides and actually conversation guides. So guides for people managers. In Canada alone, we have 4,000 employees with people management responsibilities. And not all of those people managers were comfortable having these conversations with their team, knew how to facilitate appropriate and necessary discussion. So putting out guides for people managers with really practical information on how to help employees build confidence in speaking up about systemic racism, anti-Black racism, racial harassment, and discrimination in the workplace. Because really it starts with your direct manager, with your leader. And so to have all of our leaders empowered to have those conversations in a respectful and productive way, because the last thing we want is for our employees to say, well, I'm not comfortable, or I'm nervous, I'm going to say the wrong thing, so I'm just not going to talk about it. So really lots and lots of support for employees and people managers on that front. And then maybe I'll just touch on our CEO, Brian Porter, because he's really taken some fantastic and admirable steps in the last little while. So Brian Porter, alongside several other leaders from corporate Canada, participated in the inaugural Black North Initiative Summit. So Scotiabank signed the Black North Initiative CEO Pledge, which outlined 7 goals for organizations aimed at helping to end anti-Black systemic racism and creating opportunities for all of those in underrepresented Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Scotia Capital Vice Chairman Mark Mulrooney was also named to the board. So really proud to have those 2 senior leaders from Scotiabank participate and be industry leaders in that important initiative.
Great. It's really, really great to hear how Scotiabank is leading the way there. It's very important. I just wanted to say before I embark on our last question from me, just remind the audience that we'd love to hear questions from you for the last few minutes of the day. But the last question I wanted to ask Simone is what's on your radar for the future? So is there anything coming down the pipeline, other plan sponsors in the audience might want to hear about, anything you're thinking about there that you'd like to share?
Absolutely. It's an exciting time. I mean, there's so much going on in this space and so many ways that we can support our employees. I'll say the one group that we didn't really touch on today, but is supporting parents in our workforce. We talked a bit about parental leave for new parents, but for all of our existing parents who we've heard, from in society in general, it's not unique to Scotiabank, have really struggled in the last 6 months. So hot off the presses, we're actually announcing to employees next week an expanded partnership with a national childcare provider to make sure that as schools open or don't open or partially open, close again, it's a really uncertain time for parents in particular. So new support there in terms of emergency childcare, ongoing childcare, and making sure that parents can find childcare that is safe and they are comfortable with. We've rolled out a number of mental health webinars specifically for parents dealing with healthy routines, parenting through the pandemic. We had a child psychologist come in and speak. We had an occupational therapist come in and speak about behaviors that we've been seeing. So I'd say that's one subgroup of employees where we are really actively focused on providing support. And then, of course, like everyone else, trying to support our work from home employees. So we have, I mentioned earlier, that this bifurcation of, really frontline heroes who were in the branches, keeping the banking system and the economy running through the depths of the pandemic. And very quickly earlier in the year, supported that group with additional per diem payments, getting plexiglass installs, very strict health and safety protocols, travel policies to make sure that our workplaces were absolutely as safe as they could possibly be. And now also looking at, for our employees working from home, how do we make sure they have safe and healthy ergonomic setups? How do we make sure their mental health is protected? We call it working from home, but someone said to me the other day, actually, it's more like living at work. So helping employees to define the right boundaries and make sure that everyone's working in a way that is physically and mentally healthy and safe is another key priority for us in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. The first question I wanted to get into from the audience sort of references what you've just mentioned. So it's relating back to the well-being account. They'd like to know who administers the program, but also, do you believe that you'll continue the reimbursements for things like desks and office equipment and printers into next year? I guess that speaks a little bit to maybe what your kind of return to work process is going to be like.
Sure. So a couple of questions. So the well-being account is administered as part of our flexible benefits program. Manulife is our partner in administering our benefits plan. So they've set it up for us. They have the enrollment tool and the claims submission tool. So I hope that answers the first part of the question. And then it is a taxable account. So we do have some flexibility as opposed to a healthcare spending account where the expenses really need to align with a guide to protect the tax status of the plan. Because the well-being account is taxable, we have a bit of flexibility in terms of the type of expenses that are reimbursed. We haven't actually made that decision yet around whether home office equipment will continue to be an eligible expense. We introduced it as a one-time expense. But I guess I would say our philosophy is always around flexibility. And if it makes sense to keep it in there and it's adding value for our workforce, then it's certainly something we would consider allowing for next year as well.
Okay, great. Second question also relates to the well-being account. So this person says these are great supports for employees, but they wanted to know from a cost perspective, has this had an impact on the overall benefits budget? And were there other benefits that you had to scale back to be able to introduce the well-being account? And if so, how did you decide what to reduce?
So maybe I'll answer the second part first. We did not reduce any benefits this year. What we saw, I think, along with many other plan sponsors, was a natural decrease in claims in the months of maybe March, April, and May. And even now, they're still, I don't think they're back at 100%. And that just speaks to, you can't submit dental claims if you're not going to the dentist, right? When everything's closed. So we did see a little bit lower claims than we usually budget for in some areas. But this was really a net new investment from the organization. So yes, there was a significant cost associated with $500 per person for 40,000 employees. I mean, you can multiply it out, but it's something that we felt was absolutely essential and speaks to our earlier the philosophy I mentioned earlier of preventative healthcare. So our employees had a need, and we felt we had to and wanted to step up and meet that need. So we did it through additional investments from the organization into the benefits plan.
Okay, great. We actually have a pension question, even though today's group benefits day.
Sure, I can take it. Yeah.
I know it's in your job title has pension in it. And, tomorrow we have our DC pension day, and on Wednesday we have our DB pension day. So maybe as a bit of a prelude to that. It was the question's a little bit around decumulation. So you had mentioned, obviously, that you have a DB plan and a DC plan. There's this shift naturally that we all are hearing about away from DB and towards DC. And so, sorry, the question. So they're wondering what kind of creative investment solution and products you might be hearing about to address decumulation and also sort of general longevity risk when it comes to retirement savings.
Sure. So I can add a couple of thoughts. Maybe I'll just preface it by saying our DC plan is still relatively new. So we've had a DB plan for many, many years, and we introduced a DC plan in 2018 for new hires only. So all that to say, the population in our DC plan is still relatively young. We've had many conversations with consultants and kind of other industry leaders around decumulation, but I don't think that we're the leaders in that space, just because our need hasn't quite aligned yet. So if someone wants to connect offline about ideas, certainly happy to do that. But in terms of implemented solutions in the decumulation space, that's something that will be important to Scotiabank and we'll look to explore, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years.
Right. And I guess what I would just say is we're going to be talking a little bit about that tomorrow. So if you want to hear more, please tune in. And Benefits Canada in our September issue is going to have a feature story about different investment products for decumulation strategies. So tune into that in mid-September as well. So I think we're going to wrap up here. We're running low on time. Thank you so much for your time, Simone. It was really interesting hearing about all these different elements from you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today.